Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. My name is Raquel Batista, and welcome to Critica.NYC, a show focused on the work, life, and politics of the Latinx community in New York City and beyond. Today, I am really excited that we have Angy Abreu, co-founder of Dominican Writers Association, to join us today, and we'll be talking about the work of the Dominican Writers Association, and also specifically during our conversation, we'll be talking about the issues of Black identity within the Dominican community. As we all know, during the month of February, we celebrate two things. We celebrate Black history, but we also celebrate Dominican Heritage Month. At the end of the month, we usually in the Dominican Republic, we enter into the season of Carnaval, and there's several festivities throughout the island celebrating the Lenten season. And we are, in that tradition, we very much see the influence of the African traditions in the Dominican Republic. So without much further ado, let's bring on Angy. Hi, Angy.
Hi, Raquel. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here.
I am so happy that you have finally joined.
Found time.
Because we've been working on bringing you on for quite a while since I started the show. Dominican Writers has really been so important to our community throughout the years, but I would say even more especially during the pandemic and this whole coronavirus situation. Dominican Writers, Angy, you really stepped up to the plate in terms of bringing us content to our homes through our computers, talking about writers and authors promoting their work, but also, giving people the tools, right, of how do you become a writer, how do you get into this space that always seems very much like this mythical, magical land that is very hard to get into and to break through, to become a writer, and really an organization that really brings up the culture and elevates it. And, you really are an inspiration to me. I have to say, you really are, in terms of, all the work that you've been doing over the years. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Raquel. I appreciate that so much.
So why don't you, I know, we're going to start off with a little basic stuff, right? But then, we can talk about some of the deeper issues that you see when it comes to Dominican writers, here in the United States, but also in the Dominican Republic and around the world. But tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and, what was the impetus for you to say, wow, we need to create this organization and create this platform?
Sure. So as Raquel mentioned, my name is Angy Abreu, and I am the founder and creative director of Dominican Writers Association. And our platform was created to promote the works of specifically Dominican American authors within the U.S. Slowly, we have been expanding to not only writers of the diaspora, but also writers that are within our island in Dominican Republic. They're very different spaces. I'm still learning more and more about it, but it's something that we focus on, helping the writer publish the traditional and the non-traditional way, which is called self-publishing. So that's why, that's the space. And the reason why that space was created was because I felt that Dominican writers as a whole were not very visible, right? Whenever you would ask people if they knew of a Dominican writer, they would say no. But I had met so many during the years, published and non-published poets and whatnot, that I felt that our community needed that. especially given that the Dominican culture is not, how do I say that? We don't have una cultura de leer, right? Reading is not something that is promoted as much as it is here in the US. Purchasing books and valuing books is not as much a priority in the DR as it is here in the US. It is something that I have grown to learn is more for the privileged. Even when it comes to publishing, if you don't have money in DR, uno chalito guardado, like you can't publish a book, you can't self-publish because it is insanely expensive for an author over there to publish their works. So part of the work that we do here is educating and providing the tools and the resources that writers need to go the traditional route, publishing here in the US, or self-publishing from wherever they may find themselves.
You know, I find it interesting that you bring up, right, this cultural piece of, you know, reading in the Dominican community. Like one of the things I always think about when like my father, for example, when I was younger, his thing, he loved reading the small Western books that they used to sell like on 181st Street, like him, my uncles would.
And they were novelas too. They were little mini novelas.
Yes, and they would exchange them and that, you know, and they would read those. And then they would also read the Bible, right? And that was like really the extent of reading. And maybe the newspaper, right? That was the extent of reading, you know? And so, and my father would always say, no, porque los dominicanos no leen. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe, you know, and I think, of course, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? You know, culturally, historically, economically, you know, and I also think of, you know, it's hard to have books and have maybe paper, right, in the Dominican Republic, because things say, you know, will spoil, or a hurricane comes and will like destroy all your things. So, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons as to why a person, you know, would, you know, not either have books or not have books, and, you know, reading and literacy and all of that. But, you know, I think, you know, I come up during an era of like the late 90s, early 2000s, when, you know, when people talked about US Dominican authors, you know, the people that were always talked about was Julia Alvarez and Junot Diaz. Like those were like our two top authors. Yeah, and that was it. Right? But, you know, for me, it was like always looking at Latino authors and then Dominican authors within that realm. And so, you know, before we were talking a little bit about that space, right, of in New York City, right, you know, you have other Latino groups really who were taking the leadership in the realm when it came to books and literature, like the New Yorican Poets Cafe and the New Yorican movement. You know, can you talk a little bit about that and your experience, and then you seeing this space of like, okay, we have to do this for Dominicans?
Well, like I mentioned to you before, my first love for writing came through poetry, and the spoken word spaces really called my attention. I have so much respect for spoken word artists. You know, seeing they learn their lines, perform them in such a way that just captivates you. To me, that is just, I don't know, it brings me such a joy to see really, really great performers. And I spent a lot of my time in the early 2000s in the New Yorican Poets Cafe, because those were my people. Those are the people that I related to, the writers, the poets, the performers, the creatives. Those were the people that were going to teach me how to, you know, take my poetry to the next level. Those were the people who later became friends of mine, and whenever they got to publish a book, I would support them and purchase their book, and through them I learned how to self-publish a book, right? It wasn't my people necessarily, Dominicans, because I would go to the Dominican book fair, you know, I would go to the Dominican women's book fair, but no one would ever have a conversation with you about how to publish a book, ever. And to me, that was just astounding, because I was looking at these writers like, I want to be you. How do I get there? You know, I don't just want to be here showcasing my book. I want to be a writer. And how come no one is sharing this information with me? Why are there so many gatekeepers in this space? Which is something that, of course, when I created Dominican Writers, I was like, absolutely not. You know, so many people tell you, why do you share so much information? Why aren't you charging for this information? And I'm like, because it's free. How can I charge someone for this info, or, you know, or not even share this information that could mean the world to them, right? Because when I needed it, I had to like do a lot of research. I had to dig deep to find this info. So now that I have it, I'm going to share it with my platform.
Yeah, you know what, in Northern Manhattan, in terms of like book culture and, you know, the having of the conferences and book fairs, you know, I remember when Calliope was open. And that was a really major institution in our community. And then they had to shut down. And I remember, you know, how devastating that was.
He's still there.
Oh, he's still there?
You need to bring him on your show. He has a table.
I thought it like...
No, he has been reduced to a table. Para que tú veas que cuando algo es para ti, es para ti. Right? He was passionate about sharing books with his community. And even though he lost his space, he still has a table on Dykeman. And any day you could pass by his table and purchase books from him. He has about 100 books laid out on his tables in Spanish or English, and you could purchase the books from him. And to me, that was like, wow, like shutting down his space. He wasn't going to stop doing what he loved.
Yeah.
Right? He's still going to continue sharing books with the community.
Yeah, no. And you know, what I wanted to say is like, I remember that moment of when the store had to shut down. It was like 2005.
It was crushing. It was like heartbreaking.
And it was very heartbreaking. And the fact that like, he stays committed, right? And he has his table, he's out there, he's still doing it. But then, you know, you have new movements coming along like Word Up. And I know that you've worked really closely with Word Up. And Word Up and Dominican Writers are like hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How could I not support a space like Word Up? You know, to me, Word Up is everything I would have been had I chosen to open a bookstore. You know, their devotion to the community, how much involved they get with helping out the community. They're not only just a bookseller. They're out there very much involved with their neighbors. And, you know, that's an extension of who I am as well. And it's something that you see reflected in Dominican Writers. If we could share vaccination information or COVID resources, anti-racist resources, anything and everything that we could share to help the community, I'm going to share it. We're located uptown. I live in Washington, in the heart of Washington Heights. And what happens in this community affects me, not just as an organization, but as a person who is part of this community. So any and every information that I could share that that is going to help somebody, a neighbor of mine, I'm going to do it. You know, like the other day, my mom and I were talking about how difficult it is for people to find vaccinations uptown, you know, and I said to my mom, if I had the time, I would be opening my doors to people and having them come through so I could make their appointment online, because so many of our folks don't speak English, don't have access to the internet. Like, people think that everyone has the internet and that everyone knows how to use the internet. That's not the case.
No,
And I said to her, if I had the time, I would be opening my doors and helping people, make these appointments. But, the extent of my help is giving you a phone number, telling you, here, call this person and make an appointment through them.
yeah.
But
And so I know you do more than Dominican Writers, right? Because you also have your job. And
I have a 9 to 5.
I feels like when I see you that you do Dominican Writers full time. Like it feels like it's full time.
I do.
Yeah.
I have a 13-year-old and I have a dog and but I tell people, I am very passionate about this platform and I have my own vision of where I want this platform to be in a few years. And that's what I'm working towards. That's where my dedication is. I wake up with Dominican Writers 24/7 on my mind.
Yeah.
My brain is kind of una cosa loca because I'm like, maybe I have ADHD that I'm able to multitask and do so many things at the same time because my day job is very demanding, but still I find time to run our platform.
That's really wonderful. I feel like for me, I really came to learn so much more about Dominican writers, at a very particular juncture in our history, right? It was like almost 3 years ago, right? And then, the whole story around and situation around Diaz comes to light. And, there were a lot of, different reports and issues that came out, but I feel like Dominican writers really held a particular space during that period and was really able to then launch, into the scene all of these really wonderful Dominican, especially women writers that are now being, promoted from like Elizabeth Acevedo on Estee Lauder commercials. Wow. I was like, what? Is that her? That's really fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about that time?
You're referring to last year, or what time are you referring to exactly?
With Junot Diaz.
Oh wow. Well, it's interesting, because I created this platform in the spring of 2015. And for about 2 years, I wasn't too committed to the platform because I wasn't really sure about what I wanted it to be. And I didn't want this to be a hobby. I wanted this something that made an impact. So it took me a bit to think about what it really was that I wanted to do with the platform. And then in the spring of 2018, we launched Elizabeth Acevedo's book, The Poet X, to about 200 and change people at the Alianza Dominicana. And to me, that was just like, because sometimes people look at me and are like, yeah, right, you're launching this book. Like, ¿cuánta gente van a venir? 50 people. And I'm like, like, and our platform probably had about 1,500 followers back then, 3,000 maybe. And I put so much love and so much energy into our authors, and I believe in every single one of them. I believe in every single book that we promote. And to have all these people come through, all these Dominicans come through, and the younger generation especially, to learn about who Elizabeth Acevedo was, to purchase her book, to me, that is just like, ka-ching, not the money-making sign, but, like, this is great. This is wonderful. The impact is being made. Especially, when I hear so many people say, I have never read a Dominican book, but because of your platform, I know of authors and I'm now reading more and more of them. Or I discovered this author through your platform. I didn't know that these authors existed. I am so happy that I'm reading works by my people and for my people. That is the impact I want to make, and that we continue to make. And then, there was we hosted the 3 nights of the Oscar Wilde one-man show at Alianza Dominicana. 3 nights where it was a full house. About 170 people came through each night. People will come the first time, would love the play, and then they will come back the second night with their family or their friends. And because the play is amazing, and it's actually, I think it's turning 5 years or something this month, because I got an invitation to their gala, and to then be part of the book launch with Word Up of Juno's the Island Born, his first children's book, right? And then a week later,
and at United Palace.
Yes, and then a week later, have the whole world come down upon our beloved author, right?
Yeah.
It was soul crushing, because we're told not to idolize our authors, but we do idolize them. We want to win a Pulitzer. We like Juno did. We want our books to be in the New York Times book list. And when it's one of our own, we take that personal. It's like if it were our primo that you bring into your house all the time. Right. Who messed up, and you're like, damn, now everybody knows. Like, I don't believe in the cancel culture. I think it takes away from the conversation. I think that moment when even Juno came out and spoke about his own sexual abuse, and when he was being accused of committing sexual assault himself, I think we could have broadened the conversation and taken advantage of that, and really sitting down and talking about things that happen in our community, right? Things that we keep quiet in our communities, things that we should talk about, because what Juno went through, and also the misogyny that he depicts in his books, the blatant disrespect that some people felt he portrays in his books is not anything new to our community. It's just that nobody wants to talk about it. So guess what? They close the book on Juno, he disappears, and that's it. No one is having the conversation. Right? And then this is why we have such issues like el matrimonio infantil still happening in the DR, right? You think that in DR you would continue to you would start having these big conversations about the Me Too movement, about misogyny, about child abuse, about child marriage. You think it would be a bigger conversation, but it's not. And and speaking of Juno, I have been watching him in these recent interviews that he's been doing with Spanish organizations who are Dominican and who specifically cater to the Spanish-speaking reader, right? At no point whatsoever have they touched on the subject. They don't mention it at all. They just stick to his writing, and that's it. And I don't believe that people should forget. I don't think that he should be condemned for the rest of his life. I don't think he should be canceled, but I think it's a conversation that we need to address. And the fact that we're not addressing it, to me, the way I feel about it is disrespectful to our community. Because these are things that affect us very, very deeply. And I'm not talking about let's address this and accuse them. You're guilty. This is what you did. Que toco lo otro. No, let's talk about the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't want any details about your behavior or whatnot, but let's talk about misogyny. Let's talk about toxic masculinity. Let's talk about sexual assault in our community. We need to talk about these things.
Yes, Angie. Look, I agree with you on all of these points. I think that there can be a way to hold that conversation in a way that's, in the ideals of restorative justice, where it's not about pointing fingers and blaming, but about really understanding like what happened and how it went down and how people felt, and what can we do together to move forward. I think, there are things that like have occurred right in the past that it was just like, culturally what was happening, what was the vibe. You hear all these stories of all these like artists, right, from the 80s and the 90s, that you're like, oh my God, that person did all of those things, right? And how is the community going to deal with that? Because I also think, and I deeply believe, I know, personally as well, I'm sure he has a lot more books in him, that will hopefully come and that we'll get to read and enjoy, and that there is that missing piece of that, of just that one conversation that needs to happen in order for us as a community to really move forward. But all of that, we shall see, right, or how all of that develops.
Yeah, I think our community needs to hold each other accountable, because how do I, como te digo, I can't provide Juno a space on Dominican Writers without having him address all these issues.
Yes.
Right? Like, what does that say about what I stand for, what my platform stands for, right? And it's just, I mean, it's very difficult to navigate, but me personally, I would need to have a conversation. Like, I would love for Juno to come back and host a class on machismo.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the machismo that you have in your books. The way you portray women in your books. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we have learned from that. Let's talk about how do we address that in our community. Mm-hmm. Right? So how do we write about those things in our books?
Yeah,
I think there's so much that he could contribute, right? Especially if he has been going through therapy, if he has been growing as a person. I think there's a lot that he could still contribute to the community and restore his reputation with our literary community, because Dominican Americans are not ready to take Bruno back. They're not trying to have him back. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a few more years of a while before he can do that.
Yeah. Well, let's take that as an invitation, right, to him to have this conversation. Let's talk about a plan, right, on how to, hopefully come to some sort of level where there can be that, right, welcoming him back into, the circles of Dominican writers and, and the Dominican community at large in New York City, right, specifically in the circles where, he had so much of his time, right, in the past. So, if he sees this, maybe, this is an invitation. But, but then after all of that, right, then all these women, right, burst onto the scene. All of these wonderful writers, like you had mentioned, Elizabeth Acevedo, Angy Cruz, right? She came out with a new book as well. There's been all these children books that you guys have been promoting. And then like all of a sudden Dominican Writers becomes this go-to organization for a lot of the publishing houses, right? They come knocking at your door. Tell us a little bit about how that has been.
Again, I think many of our writers are losing their fear about sharing their work. It's an ongoing process working with them and letting them, teaching them first how to accept that you are a writer. And then secondly, how to train them to lose that fear and share their work. I mean, I've heard so many excuses from people, from writers, about why they don't share their work. Oh, it's going to get stolen. Oh, if I put it up here, I can't publish it. So many reasons. And I'm just like, if you really want to be known as a writer, one, you got to write, right? And two, you got to share it because, how do you publish a book and not share your book? Right? And believe you me, I get tons of writers that DM us and say, hey, I just published my poetry book. Could you go check it out? And when I go on their social media, I can't find the book. So I gotta have like some really good detective skills for me to find the book. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I have to tell people, I was like, Mira, I cannot be more invested in sharing your work than you are. So when you get it together, when you accept that, one, I'm a writer, and two, that I wrote this book and you're ready to share it with the world, you let us know. And we will share it as well.
Yeah.
But, other than that, it's like, it amazes me, how many people publish a book and then they're like, oh my God, nobody has bought my book or nobody has seen it. And I'm like, but you only mentioned it once. Like, I tell people, look, publishing a book is like a pregnancy. Tú duras 9 meses con la barriga, ¿verdad? Everybody is looking at you.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody is looking at you and they see your belly. That's how it should be with your book. Everybody should know that you're about to publish a book. You're about to give birth to this book. What happens when you give birth? What happens when you give birth is that you are annoying the hell out of everybody with baby pictures. Right? And then you have, every month you have like, oh, my baby turned a month, or my baby turned 2, or my baby turned 3 months. ¿Verdad? You should do the same thing with your book. People came to visit your baby. Show who purchased your book.
Yeah.
Ask people to send you pictures of when they buy the book. Because if people see other people buying the book, then they're like, oh, this must be, interesting. Maybe I should go get the book.
Yeah. But now
that's how people should treat publishing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess, there are people, right? This is why, they need to talk to you, right? And they should get involved in Dominican Writers and become a member so that they can, learn these things, because it's not only you write the book, you publish the book, but then there's the business of the book, right? And then there's the business of the marketing and the business of, getting it out there, right? If your goal is to, right, sell your book, get it out into people's hands, have other people read it, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I know that recently you've had this campaign on your social media and promoting, Black history in the Dominican community, and books written about Dominicans and Blackness. And it seems like you have a goal of putting up like one a day, right? To show like 28 books throughout the month.
Yeah, that was the intention, but I'm still looking for more books.
You're still looking for more books? Okay.
Yes.
How is that going?
I posted about 11 books that I have found speaking about our Dominican Blackness, because as a Dominican American who came here when I was 3 years old, who was raised in this country, like many, many Dominicans, no one ever spoke to me about my history. And then even if they do talk to you about your history, a lot of our parents don't know their history either. Mm-hmm. So it has been my goal for me to learn about our history. And I know also that so many of our followers are in the same boat as me. And one of the reasons also why I started sharing these texts is because in 2 weeks, we're inaugurating our Dominican Studies book club, where we're reading a text on Dominican history every month, so that we could all learn and we could all have a discussion on what these texts really mean. Many of us are unlearning things that we have been taught about our history, and also learning new things, dispelling a lot of myths and lies and confusions and so much more. And I think it's very important, especially as writers, right? Because if we want to continue writing, and if we ever want to include any historical facts or whatnot in our books, we need to know our true history. So that's the reason why I've been sharing these texts this month. Even though, we get trolls all the time telling us that we don't know what we're talking about, that Dominicans are Dominicans, we're not Black.
Yeah, that's a whole other show.
Yeah, I just laugh at them and say, all the best to you.
Yeah, that's a whole other show. But I think it's really timely that you are doing that, because there's been so many conversations, like for example Anthony Stevens, right, formerly with the Dominican Studies Institute, has been talking about for a long time, right, the need to have Dominican studies within CUNY, right, and even within SUNY and within all, right, higher education, there should be concentration on Dominican studies, right? Recently in Connecticut, they've decided that they're going to institute, race and ethnic studies, right, from K through 12, right? We don't have that in New York City. There isn't necessarily like a way to really promote, these kind of like Dominican studies, for example, unless you're a parent or you're a teacher and you're making sure that that's happening, right? It's not systemically happening. So I find that having this platform also really creates that vehicle for our higher education institutions and, our, kindergarten through 12 to have access to these authors.
I think it's super important for our children to have access to that.
How you've done that work. Because I know, because you've done work, you've collaborated in those ways.
What do you mean with?
Like public schools, higher education,
Yeah, well, yeah, when it comes, but more so in the case of schools who need diversity. Like we work with schools where the majority of their student population is Dominican children. And so we bring them Dominican programming, and more so so that our children could feel identified and reflected within the books that they read, right? Because I think that's so important. I didn't have that when I was a child. But my son now has it, so that makes a huge difference to me. When I hear that my son is reading Julia Alvarez in his 8th grade class, I'm like, yes.
Oh my God, I was so excited when you guys did the collaboration with One Kin and you did the box set for children. I got the box set for my daughter, and that was it's just lovely. It was beautiful.
Yes, it was. It was important for me to do that because it's so difficult to find these books. And another thing is that, the majority of our authors are self-published. And what happens is that when you're self-published, you're left out of the equation with many of these book clubs. Like if you even sign up to a book club on bilingual books, or they're looking for books that are published traditionally. They're not checking for self-published authors.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not including them in their selections either. So for me, I spend a lot of my time curating these boxes. I review these books. I check the quality of these books. And if the quality isn't good, I don't promote it. Right. I make sure that any book that we stamp approved by Dominican Writers is something that we have reviewed. So whenever anyone asks us, hey, can you share this with your platform? Can you promote this or whatnot? Or people who simply just email us and say, can you include our book in your book box? I'm like, send me a copy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean,
if you're published, send me a copy because I need to review the book.
Yeah, you want to make sure that it's quality and it's
right.
Up to the standard of like other books out in the market, right?
Right. I mean, if you self-publish, you got to know you're competing with books that are traditionally published. So that your publication process needs to be top notch.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to think, oh, that because you self-publish, there's no way that you could publish a book correctly or successfully. That's incorrect. Yes, there is.
Yeah. So I just wanted to briefly just mention, we've had a few viewers make a few comments, and folks have been seeing some of the comments on the screen. We have Kiani in Antigua. I know she's a writer that you've worked with, Angy. She says Angy rocks. She also commented here when we were talking about the Junot Diaz situation. She said, but Junot was investigated by the Pulitzer, by MIT, and by the Boston Review, and was cleared by all of them.
That doesn't take away from the fact that he was accused,
and that he has to have a conversation,
and that doesn't take away the fact that his books are riddled with misogyny and abuse towards women. It doesn't take away from that. It doesn't take away from, it just a lot of things. Even going back to his essay. I mean, this man wrote an essay about his own sexual assault and nobody talked about it. Right? Like, the only reason this essay was ever brought into a conversation was to say, oh, that was preemptive. He wrote that because he knew that he was going to get accused of sexual assault and he just wanted people to feel sorry for him. What? Let's talk about sexual abuse in our community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's just so many conversations that we could be having with Junot. And not necessarily about, he got cleared. People don't care that he got cleared. People care that he was accused.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people care about. This is not about clearing him. I don't think a conversation is about clearing him, but it's about him restoring his image and his reputation among the Dominican American literary community.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's what it's about. It's about him restoring his reputation, explaining to us, or, whatever it is that he wants to say, people need to know that they could trust him.
Yeah.
Right? I never had a negative interaction with Junot ever in my life. I can't ever say that I had that. But there are people who claim that he did. Mm-hmm. Right? So, it's almost like, how do you take back someone that has wronged you, whether it's true or not? In your mind, he has wronged you. So how do you open yourself up to allow this person to be around you again?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Angy. I appreciate that. And then let's see what other comments. Oh, and then Kiani also mentioned, to say Dominicans are not Black is to say Dominicans are not Dominican. Digo yo.
Imagínate. The people that be coming on our Facebook page don't think so.
Yeah, but which is why I think that the work that you're doing is just so important, right? Because even if it's just posting, right, these books that talk about racial identity and racial histories in the Dominican Republic, it's to show, right, that it's real, it exists, people have studied it, people have documented
it. But it is amazing how the people who talk against these books, I'm just like, dude, there's like all this research done. Do you think that all these people got together and said, let's create this conspiracy that Dominicans are Black, and let's, fake these books and put them out in academia? And then it's not only people within the US, you also have people within the DR who have studied this, who have researched this, who hold conferences. Y como to them, it's just like, that's not real. It's like the people who are like, COVID is a hoax.
Yes, yes.
They get COVID and they still say it's a hoax. It's almost the same thing. We're not saying all Dominicans are Black. 90% of the Dominican population is Black.
Yes. And the
90%
heavily Black influence.
We have descendants, ancestry in African. I'm like, I just wish that I could go out there and give out DNA tests to everybody. A ver qué dicen. Like, they're capable of sitting there and see that they're from Nigeria or some tribe in Zimbabwe or something and still say that's not real.
But it was really wonderful. You brought talk about doing research on your family heritage.
Yes.
Yes. I watched that, did a little bit of research. I haven't totally gotten in, but I went on to the Family Search website. That was a really fun presentation that you put together there.
Yes, again, to contribute to the conversation of having us research our history. My goal is by the end of this year to maybe get 50 Dominicans to do a DNA test.
Okay, and then you want them to like publish something about that process?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Like, I bought Ancestry and I bought DNA 123. What is it? I forget. It's the other really popular DNA test. I still have them in the box. I still haven't done it. And then my friend went the other day. He went ahead and he did it by himself. I was like, oh my God, we could have done it together. We could have supported each other. But yeah, I want. I'm looking for grants and stuff that maybe would support a project like that, because I really am interested in having, you know, a few of us who, especially skeptical people.
No, that would be fantastic. It's like the show by Henry Louis Gates Jr. on PBS, where he looks into people's genealogies, and then all of a sudden there's like two people who are related to each other that never knew that they were related to each other. I love that show, you know, and I absolutely am with you on, you know, us really learning so much more about our histories. You know, I think like for me personally, it really wasn't until I was like in my, you know, in my 20s when I was like, okay, I really want to start looking more into where I'm from, where my family comes from, you know, learning like who my great grandparents are, because I didn't even know who they were. And, you know, being able to really learn more about where we come from. I think, you know, for some of us in the Dominican community, really who we know is like our very immediate family, right, and our grandparents, right? And a lot of people don't really have like those deeper conversations about where they come from.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I have a cousin in DR who started her own genealogy project a few years back. And I've been meaning to reconnect with her since I'm doing my own research as well to see if we could compare notes. Because we know we had French on our end. On my great grandmother was Black and French. So imagínate.
Yeah.
It could only get more interesting.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure for a writer like yourself, how do you, you know, integrate that in the stories that you're creating?
Right. Today I was watching this documentary on YouTube about Palenque, Colombia, who was they became a free state before Haiti did. They became free, I think, in 1753 or something like that. And Palenque, you know, most of the folks there have descendancy from Nigeria, and they retain their culture and their traditions and their Blackness. These people celebrate being Black, and to me, I was just like, "Coño, if only our people were like that."
Yeah,
I mean, that you will go to certain places in DR and be like, you know,
we have
in la zona colonial. Like, why we gotta have a statue of Cristóbal Colón? Why we can't have a statue of the slave that rebelled, against the colonizers. Those are the real heroes.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like in my own family, so my mother's mother, the woman who raised my mom, she was Cocola from Samaná, and she spoke English, right? She spoke
So
English.
she's one of those. So the Samaná blacks came to the DR in the 1800s.
Yes.
And a lot of them came from Mississippi, Philadelphia.
Yes.
To the DR, and those people, they maintained their English.
Yes, and that's actually like an area that I would love to delve in more, like to learn so much more about.
There's a few interesting videos on YouTube on the Samaná blacks.
Yes, I've watched some of those. Absolutely. But but to bring it back to Dominican writers, we have like 10 minutes left. I definitely want to hear more about what is your vision for the future for Dominican writers? Where do you want to, like, what's the next big step? I know that you did a lot of work with Dignidad Literaria to bring in, right, more diversity within the publishing industry, right? And so how are those conversations going? How are they developing? And how is this also helping push Dominican writers' agenda forward?
So, we fall under the conversation of diversity and inclusion, right? When a lot of people think that when you mention the word diverse, is just, you're invited, you're invited to the conversation, right? But it's not only about being invited to the conversation, it's also about including me in the conversation, because I matter. It's really heartbreaking to know that the reason why so many of us, not only Dominicans, but people of color, authors of color, don't get published is because the industry is so white. And, white publishers aren't checking for our stories like that. What they don't understand is not something that they're going to publish.
Have they invited you to be a part of their boards, to be a part of their,
I'm not interested in being part of a board.
You don't want to be a part. I'm just saying, like, who are people at the table?
The change I want to see is publish more authors of colors. I don't want to be in anybody's board. Like, for what? So you could say we're diverse. We got this Afro Latina on our board. No, are you gonna give me publishing power so that I could publish only authors of color?
Mm-hmm.
I'll consider that. But I would have to become a literary agent, right? I would have to be working towards, getting these manuscripts from authors of color and publishing them. We have been interviewing and working with publishing professionals who are Dominican or even people of color within the publishing industry. And, those are the people that are intent about publishing our work. And yeah, you have a few white folks who are as well, who are our allies, but they are outnumbered. Mm-hmm. And we just need to be more inclusive of authors of color. There's so many amazing stories out there that our people are telling and that our kids need to see in books. Yeah. I mean, it's just the change is super slow, right? Dignidad Literaria met up, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with Jennifer Baker, who runs minorities in publishing, and they spoke about what's been happening with the movement, but the change is just super slow. Yeah. It is. It's super slow. I just need all these publishers. Like I say, if only we would stop publishing white stories for like 5 years and just publish people of color so that we could catch up to you guys.
That's a very radical notion.
Right. Like if every publisher here in New York would just stop publishing white people and just publish authors of color, maybe we'll catch up. Maybe.
Yeah. And how many authors of color do get published a year?
Not as many as white people, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but is it like 3%, 5%?
Yeah, probably something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, besides, right, the obvious, barriers to getting to publish, what would you advise, our audience out there, young people, older people, right? Because, it's not just about millennials, right? We can look at, older folks who may want to get published, who have been writing all their lives and maybe never dared to. What would you advise them to do?
Well, I tell people that it's perfectly okay for you to want to publish traditionally. You just need to educate yourself on the process. It is a much slower process. Some people take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years sending queries to a literary agent so that they can get published. That is a long process. And you have to ask yourself, are you willing to wait? Are you willing to put in that work and invest your time in doing this for a few years? I don't want people to go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to find a literary agent in 6 months. That may not happen.
Yeah.
It may not happen. So you need to know this. And I think that's also one of the reasons why so many authors in the end decide to self-publish, because they just, like I said, when you have an industry that is 74% white and you have spent a couple of years sending out queries and noticing that no one is interested in your book, you're like, you know what? I'm going to put this out myself.
And Dominican Writers, do you publish too? Do you publish?
We do. We do publish. Not at the moment because with COVID set us back a bit, and we still have a few projects that we need to put out. But we do offer consultation where we walk the author through the process of self-publishing successfully. We teach them, how to prepare their book for publishing, how to market and promote themselves, how to get their books into libraries, how to get their books into universities and get it purchased by certain programs. Like I've seen so many amazing things with authors who self-publish that I don't want people to think that they're closing the door on themselves, that they won't have any opportunities, because we have authors who are working with PBS, who are working with Disney, and these are self-published authors. Okay, we have self-published authors who have published before, and a publisher decides that they want to now publish their book after you've self-published it. They buy the rights from you and they publish it again. There's amazing things being done, but what you need to make sure of is that you do this correctly. That, like I have this motto that says, con nosotros tú no vas a pasar vergüenza, because we share so much information on how you can publish successfully, that if you're out there embarrassing yourself, is because you want to, but not because we haven't shared info with you.
So Angy, can you please share with the audience your website? How do they contact you? What do they do if they want to do a consultation? Please share.
Sure. So you can find us on all social media platforms as Dominican Writers. Our website is also DominicanWriters.com. If you're looking for any sort of information, your first point of reference should be our website. I put in a lot of work on this website, so please look at it and click on everything. And if it turns out that you can't find the answer to your question, then email us. There's a contact form on our website. You could email us. I usually get back to people right away. If you DM us on Instagram, I would reply. On Facebook, I reply. So that's a first. And you could book a consultation via our website as well under the Writers tab. But definitely your go-to should be our website.
All right, wonderful. Bueno, Angy, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I so appreciated that you joined. Thank you again to Manhattan Neighborhood Network for giving us this platform for Critica.NYC. Thank you to our executive producer, Zenaida Mendez, and our studio manager, Freddie Pinto, for all of the work that they put in to make the show happen. Again, my name is Raquel Batista. Thank you so much, Angy, for your time. I want to encourage everyone, please check out Dominican Writers and all of their future events that are coming. I can't wait.
Yes, tomorrow we have a conversation with Ginetta Candelario, who wrote Black Behind the Ears, and Remisel Salas. They will both be in conversation, and this is going to be by the Dominican Bar Association, and we're sponsoring the event as well. If you go on our Instagram account, and even through our Facebook, we shared the event for tomorrow that you could register and not miss it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I appreciate again your time for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening.